All right. So the first question is, have you ever said something to a person with differences in ableism that you rethought after the fact? And what would you have said or done differently if you could go back in time?
Well, with this question, my issue is I can't go back and think of a time that I specifically said something to someone who was differently able than me. Not saying I never did it, but consciously I don't remember doing that. So my issue is have I said something in one of those ableistic fashions and not realizing or realize that I was being that way, or have I never actually said or done something? I can't say I would consciously do it because that would be rude, insensitive, and just plain mean. Like, I don't know why anyone would do that, but I cannot say for a fact that I have a situation like that in the memory bank or something I've done. I can't remember anyone I've been with that said or done that. As I just don't think it's something.
Like the whole idea of like microaggressions. I was reading some of those and I'm like, I think maybe we're all guilty of that.
Yeah, microaggressions like like the word retarded, viewed as like a microaggression. I remember being in middle and early high school, and people would say the word you're retarded or you're gay. It's never anything. It's never anything I used. Is I was so uncomfortable saying something like that because I thought it was wrong. I'm sure the word possibly came out of my mouth at some point to see what it felt like saying it, but I can't say I have a conscious experience to give you for this question.
All right. That's a good thing. All right. The second question, when you were growing up, can you remember any experiences in which someone of varying abilities was treated differently than you? How would a teacher in the current time respond more appropriately if it were to happen again?
So I thought about this question a lot, and I really tried to dig back into those experiences in school, way back as far as I could in elementary, middle, high. And I remember someone specifically in elementary school, and his name was Robert. And I remember he was in our classes, but he acted so differently than everyone else. And I remember I don't remember ever being told like that there was something different about him. Everyone just knew that there was something different about him. And so there would be things like assignments or expectations for tasks, and he would complete them not to the standard. And I remember always being so upset that I would do my work and I would do everything to the standard, but he got away with not doing things to the standard. And I was always so mad because I always felt like I worked so hard and he's not doing it. He's not following the rules. He's not doing it correctly. And it's never anything like I said or confronted him about. Just in my mind, I was always like, I worked hard for this 100 kind of thing. But and so I did notice that he was treated differently by teachers, and he would have different times he would go out of the classroom. So I think in today's world, which that was probably 15 years ago, so it's not too far removed, I think there would be more action to help him be better included in the classroom environment. I think it would be nice to sit students down and explain or make them aware instead of just assuming they're going to be including and loving and understanding. I mean, these kids are 6, 7, 8 years old. If they've never encountered someone like that, then they're not going to know or understand how to interact with them. So I think in today's world, if if a teacher could just sit down, introduce, explain, then it would make things go a lot smoother.
I agree. And, you know, like a lot of times as adults, we overanalyze how we would say things or whatever. Like kids are super resilient because a lot of and they're super understanding too because most kids, you know, like when you get them young enough, they haven't learned a lot of these things that adults do that are so mean and stuff. So they'd probably just be like, oh, okay. Like, you know, like that's one of our classmates and that's the expectation for them is not the same as me because we're all different, you know, like that kind of thing. I think a lot of times we approach it like freaking out as teachers, like, oh gosh, I don't know how I'm going to explain this to them. But I've had a couple experiences where I've like just, you know, had a conversation with the class, not name the kid out, you know, single-handedly, but they all know. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
we all have different things that we're really good at. We all have things that we struggle with. We all have different challenges. We just have to understand that some people are dealing with different things that we're not dealing with. And we just need to be, you know, and they're just like, okay.
Absolutely. I mean, kids are so unbelievably understanding because they haven't, I don't know how to put it, I guess, been tainted or programmed in these certain ways yet, so that when they do become an adult, certain things seem odd, off, or wrong. They're so accepting. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they really are. So just, you know, give them a little bit and it'll go a long way.
Yep, totally agree. All right. The next question is how has the idea, terminology, or public perception regarding those with ableist challenges changed in your lifetime and how?
I'm 23, so I don't feel like I have something that is super profound for this. I don't feel like I have too much that I can say is different. I would say that there has been more of a push to be more understanding, um, less segregated in a sense, but and maybe I just haven't been paying attention, but I don't feel like in the time I've been alive or since I've been in school that I've seen some big, huge shifts in my lifetime per se. Other than, like I had said, more of an effort to be understanding, including identifying like the issue with the child and not just singling out them as being a problem, but trying to find the underlying factor. But other than that, I can't give any more solid points as to changes I've seen.
Yep, totally get it. Totally get it. You're just a baby. You're only 23. I'm only 29, so. All right. And then the last little prompt is to pick an idea in the text or in the videos or any of the websites that you either don't agree with or are unsure about.
So I went back through and I watched a couple of the videos provided for this week in the module, and I probably just lack understanding. But it's about the idea of inclusion. And inclusion, I agree, is such a wonderful thing, bringing these students who are differently abled into the gen ed classrooms and letting both of these different types of students interact with each other. I think that's amazing. But what happens when you do have a student who is differently abled, who isn't the norm, and you have this gen ed teacher who hasn't been guided on the proper ways to deal with this student? What happens if they start a fight or they have a breakdown, or you know, they're not used to handling their emotions in certain senses and attack one of the other students? What happens if they break a computer because they got a bad grade on an online test or something? So I like the thought of inclusion, but I can also see so many ways that it can go wrong because gen ed teachers are not taught how to handle those types of students. I worked at a daycare for a while. I worked in childcare, and I had this private pre-K classroom, and it probably isn't like you would see in public schools, but it's the closest experience I have. I had 12 3-year-olds who would be considered normal. I had one of them who was Down syndrome, and then another one who was diagnosed as severe EBD. And the one who was diagnosed as severe EBD was not 3 years old. He was 6 years old, but he was put into that class because he operated on a sense more like he wasn't developed in a way a 6-year-old should be. So he was put with a 3-year-old. So I had 14 of these kids, and I spent most of my time trying to get that little boy to not attack his classmates, to not tear down things off the wall, to not throw toys out the classroom door, to not push over cabinets. And my issue is there's only one of me. There's 13 other students behind me. Why am I spending hours of my day focused on him and making sure he is not a danger to himself, me, or the other students when there's other ones that I have to focus on? The other little boy with Down syndrome had he had these weird, like, violent tendencies, and we had like a house area. He would take this vacuum and try and whap other students on the head with it. It was horrifying. But that goes back to inclusion is nice, but how nice is it when it doesn't work, or when the teacher can't handle it, or when it endangers other students?
Yes. That's a really, really good point, because I have felt the same way many times. I've been the gen ed co-teacher, with push-in special ed students, and it's like, what's the line really? Like, what is the line of where, okay, is this really this child's least restrictive environment? Or even if it is, at what point do we say, what about all the other kids? It's a hard conversation to have, because you don't want to, take that kid out of the class if that's what's good for them. But at the same time, like you said, a lot of times we're ill-equipped to handle it. Not even, maybe we've even been trained, but we just don't have the resources, or just like you said, we're one person,
Mm-hmm.
serve the whole class when we're having to put so much. And, then we could get into a whole conversation too about teacher burnout and stuff like that. Like all these things that are best for kids, maybe, but realistically, in the real life application,
It was hard. I cried a lot. I would go on my lunch break and I would go to my car and cry because it's so exhausting. I mean, they're in private pre-K, so they're learning the most basics of basics. But at 3 and 4 years old, there's so much, what word am I looking for? Like, I would micromanage them because they needed that, and they need to be told what to do, where to go, how to do things. Say the same thing 10 days in a row, they're still going to need your help because they're so young. So not only is it just mentally and emotionally exhausting having to deal with those young kids, but now you're being thrown for a loop because you have these other kids, and you're already barely know how to take care of a regular kid, so now you have to now you have this other ingredient added to the mix. The days were interesting for sure. And they were hard, but whenever the days were good, they were very good. I can't say not all of them were bad.
Well, good. That was a very, very good point, which I will be able to do what it says and contemplate my answer and write a really good response to that one, because I feel really passionately about what you just brought up. So,
Yes.
Although I don't really have an answer either to what you are unsure about, because I'm unsure about it too. So.
Oh, well, that makes me feel good. I brought up a good point, because in the videos, it made it seem like this is the answer. this is inclusion. But the schools that they were showing were inclusion focused schools, so they had the resources.
Yeah.
How many inclusion focused schools are there?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Like my county, there are students that need a one-on-one para, like para sport. They're not going to do that. You
Yeah.
know, they're not. They're just not. So it's like, okay, now what? Are you still going to put this student in my class? I'll do my best, but it's probably not going to go well. So
Mhm.
awesome. I'm going to stop recording.